Thank you so much for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Duback. I'm the business manager for Lincoln Way. Thank you for being here for this IMRF presentation this morning. We have Rebecca here, and I'll let her introduce herself in just a minute, but this is going to be live streamed and available as a recording after the fact, as you probably saw in the email. So if you have colleagues who might be interested in this topic, please let them know. Please share it with them, and please share not only the information you're hearing, but remind them that it's available. So this is something that my office has heard feedback. I think a lot of employers probably during COVID, there wasn't a whole lot of professional development, information, trainings, just sort of little workshops like this. But I talked with Corey Sieber and with Linda Stone, and I know that historically Lincoln Way used to do some of these things, and be that for IMRF, for TRS, for 403Bs, for different types of benefits that are available to our employees that sometimes I feel like our employees don't always know about, or they might have questions, they don't know who to ask. And so this is the first of what's hopefully several steps where we're going to try to put together little workshops like this a couple of times a year just to get information out to you. It's always going to be voluntary, but you can, again, share with your peers, share with your colleagues, and something that we're going to do kind of from the business office standpoint to get that information in front of people. So if you have anything for me or for Corey after the fact, let us know. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Alanis, and today I'm going to be the speaker for your presentation. All right. Today, I would like to provide you with a general overview of IMRF so that you have a better understanding of our organization. Then we will talk about your IMRF benefits, death benefits, disability benefits, refunds, and also retirement benefits. Then we're going to talk about how your pension is calculated. And then lastly, we'll talk about the voluntary additional contribution program. So let's get started. IMRF has gone web-centric, so for those of you that have not created an online member access account, I encourage you to do so. And what you would need to do is go to our website, which is www.imrf.org, and request a registration key. And then a 16-digit key will be mailed to your home, and that's what you'll use to create the online account. Member Access is a great resource. So with the online account, you can run pension estimates for yourself. You can view the wages and service credit that's reported on your behalf. You can update your address, change your beneficiaries, and even apply for benefits. All right, IMRF is a 401A defined benefit plan. And so basically, what does that mean? Well, it means that your benefits are defined in advance so that you know what you're going to receive in retirement. And with a defined benefit plan, retirement income is guaranteed by the employer, and it's computed using a formula based on several factors that has to do with your length of service, your age, and your salary. And so since 1941, IMRF has provided its members with a sound and efficient system for the payment of retirement, disability, and death benefits. All right, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund was created in 1939 by the Illinois General Assembly, but we officially began operating in 1941. And we were created in response to economic conditions at the time of the Great Depression. So at that time, public employees could not contribute to Social Security, so they needed some form of security for when they were no longer able to work. And when IMRF started, we only had 5 employers and $5,000 in assets. As of December 31st, 2022, we now have 3,050 employers, and we have approximately $47.9 billion in assets. So we've come a long way. All right, so out of the 3,050 units of government that participate in IMRF, we have approximately 175,000 active members. That would be all of you here today. We have about 148,000 inactive members. So an inactive member would be a member that's no longer working for an IMRF employer that has left their contributions on deposit. And some of the reasons for that would be either the member is hoping to return to another IMRF employer in the future to achieve more service credit, or they might just be waiting until they're age eligible to collect a pension. And then currently we have approximately 151,000 benefit recipients. I also want you to know that your employer only funds your retirement. So your employer does not fund any other member's retirement other than their own. And every January 1st, we change your employer's rate because we always want to ensure that we are 100% funded, as we have a full funding goal of 100%. At the end of December 31st, 2022, we were 98% funded actuarially. Also, I want to let you know that your benefits are protected, and they're protected by the Illinois statute. So they could change the rules for future members, but current members' benefits cannot be diminished. All right, so this pension dollar represents how your IMRF pension is funded. We do not receive any funding at all whatsoever from the state of Illinois. And so funding for your pension comes from three sources: your member contributions, your employer's contributions, and then also IMRF's investment returns. And so we don't have the 2023 dollar yet, but back in 2022, 10 cents or 10% of every dollar that was paid to an IMRF retiree came from the member's contributions. 22 cents or 22% of that dollar came from the employer's contributions, and a whopping 68 cents or 68% came from IMRF's investment returns. All right, if you are wondering what you contribute to IMRF, that's set by the Illinois statute. And so you contribute 4.5% of your salary every month towards a future pension, 3.75% towards your pension, and 0.75% for a surviving spouse contribution. And those contributions are tax deferred, so you are not paying any Illinois state tax or federal tax on the money used to make your contributions to IMRF. All right, like I stated earlier, your employer's rate changes every January, and each employer has a different rate because, again, we always want to ensure that we're 100% funded. So if you take the average of our 3,050 employers in 2023, they're averaging at 6.55%. Your employer is currently contributing 8.570%. And if you want to know more about how we calculate your employer's rate every year and just how IMRF is doing in the market, you can always watch our employer rate meeting webinar. And so you can watch that webinar by going to our website, which again is imrf.org. And Brian Collins, he's our executive director, and Mark Nanini, he's our CFO. They are the presenters for that webinar. All right, let's get into your benefits. So your IMRF benefits include retirement, disability, death, and then also refunds. Okay, IMRF has two levels of participation for our members. So there's our regular Tier 1 plan and our regular Tier 2 plan. And a member's classification is determined by the date they began participating in IMRF or one of the 12 other Illinois reciprocal public pension systems. And later in the presentation, I'll show you a full list of those reciprocal systems. So for members that began participating prior to January 1st of 2011, you are considered a Tier 1 member. And you're a Tier 1 member no matter what. So even if you leave your IMRF employer and you take a refund of your contributions and then later are re-enrolled with another IMRF employer or reciprocal system, you'll still be a Tier 1. So you're basically grandfathered into that tier. Anybody that was enrolled with IMRF or one of the reciprocal systems on or after January 1st of 2011, you are a Tier 2 member. And so if you need more assistance in determining which tier you are, you can always look online. If you have a member access account, it will show you on your home screen, your My IMRF page, which tier you're enrolled in. Or you can always call IMRF and we can look up that information for you. And so our contact phone number is 1-800-ASK-IMRF. All right, so if a person is enrolled in a qualifying position, they must be enrolled in IMRF. So participation is not optional, it's mandatory if you're working in a qualified position. And so what determines the enrollment is it's based on the number of hours an employee is expected to work in a rolling 12-month time frame. And so that's called the hourly standard. And so there's two different hourly standards, the 600-hour standard or the 1,000-hour standard. So school districts and educational employers have a 600-hour standard. Non-school district employers can either keep the 600-hour standard or they can elect the 1,000-hour standard. Okay, so let's talk about how you qualify for a regular Tier 1 pension. And so to qualify, you must have 8 years of service credit to be vested. Once you have 8 years of service credit, you're officially vested for that pension. Although you can retire as early as age 55, age 60 is considered your unreduced pension age. So if you do retire under the age of 60, there is a reduction in the formula when we calculate your pension, and that reduction is permanent. And so it's 0.25% for every month under the age of 60. However, if you have at least 30 years of service credit, but less than 35, then we'll calculate your pension using the lesser of the reduction. So the lesser of 35 years of service credit or the lesser of every month under the age of 60. And let me give you a couple examples. So let's pretend that I'm exactly 55 years old and I have 12 years of service credit. Well, then as you can see on the screen, the reduction in the formula when the benefits calculated would be 15%. And the reason why is that I'm 5 years shy of the unreduced pension age, which again is age 60. All right, let's use another example. Let's pretend I'm exactly age 55, but I have 34 years of service credit. Well, then as you can see, the reduction would only be 3% because it's calculated using the lesser of the two reductions, and I'm closer to having 35 years of service credit than I am to being age 60. If you want to avoid a reduction in the formula, you need to wait until you're age 60 to retire as a Tier 1 member. The only way to avoid a reduction in the formula when we calculate your benefit if you want to retire under age 60 is, again, to have 35 years of service credit. All right, so let's move along and let's talk about how you qualify for a regular Tier 2 plan pension. So for a regular 2 pension, you need to have at least 10 years of service credit. Once you have 10 years of service credit, you are officially vested for a pension. And in this case, although you could retire as early as age 62, your unreduced pension age is age 67. So if you retire under the age 67, there is a reduction in the formula when we calculate your benefit. And again, that reduction is permanent. And unfortunately for a Tier 2 member, it is slightly higher than a Tier 1. So it's 0.5% for every month under the age of 67. However, same rules apply. If you have at least 30 years of service credit, but less than 35, then we'll calculate the reduction using the lesser of the two. So the lesser of every month under the age of 67, or the lesser of every month under 35 years of service credit. And again, if you need more clarification on how the reductions work, you can always call our contact center or send a secure message in to IMRF. All right, so your IMRF pension benefits are based on your earnings and your years and months of service with your IMRF employer or employers, and also your age at retirement. So let's start with talking about your earnings. All right, and we're going to talk about what is required by law to be reported to IMRF. So any regular wages for working must be reported to IMRF. If you're a Tier 2 member, then there is a wage cap. And so that wage cap in 2023, as you can see, is $123,489.18. So you would not make any contributions on any wages higher than that. Also, any overtime pay that's paid to you gets reported to IMRF, as well as vacation pay, back pay, sick pay, bonuses, and awards, with the exception of gift cards. Also, if you contribute to a 403B plan or a 457 plan with your employer, that does not reduce your earnings when they're reported to IMRF. And so everything is reported to us up to 1 month after you terminate. So while you're working, up to 1 month after. So basically, if you stop working for your employer in June, anything that's paid to you in June or July would be considered reportable earnings to IMRF. Anything paid to you August or later would not. All right, so the amount of your pension is partially determined by how much service credit you have. So let's talk about how you earn service credit. Service credit is not based on a full-time or a part-time position. Remember, it's based on you being employed in a position that the employer anticipates you to meet that hourly standard. So for every month that you're working in a qualified position, you earn a month of IMRF service credit. If you're on an approved IMRF disability leave, for every month that you're on disability leave, you'll earn a month of service credit. Also, if you're in a seasonal position in which you work at least 6 consecutive months out of the year, as long as your employer has you enrolled as a seasonal employee and you're still considered in an employment engagement relationship with the employer, you'll still receive service credit for the months that you're not working, that you're off on your seasonal leave. Also, unused unpaid sick time can be converted to service credit in the formula when we calculate your pension at retirement time. However, the sick time cannot be used to vest. So for a Tier 1 member, you need to have 8 years of service credit before any sick time would be reported to us. And again, for a Tier 2 member, you would need to have 10 years of service credit. Also, you might be eligible to purchase service credit for a variety of different reasons. So one would be to reinstate service credit if you took a refund of contributions in the past. Another would be to convert time that you served in the military. So for more information about all the different types of service credit that you might be eligible to purchase, you can go to our website, imrf.org, or call our contact center, and there's a lot of information provided there. All right, now I mentioned that the unused unpaid sick days can be used in your IMRF pension calculation. Make sure to check with your employer, though, on what their internal policy is regarding sick time at retirement time, because every IMRF employer is a little bit different. But on our end, we can accept up to a maximum of 240 days. So as you can see on the screen, that would give you an extra year of service credit in the formula when we calculate your benefit. Only full days are applied, so no partial days, and we do not round up. Also, there are a couple different rules. So your pension effective date must be within 60 days from when you terminate your position with your IMRF employer in order for that sick time to count. So for example, let's pretend I'm vested for a pension and I'm a Tier 1 member and I leave my employer at age 50. Well, because I'm not eligible to draw the benefit until age 55, too much time would have elapsed from when I left my employer to when I'm collecting my benefit, so that sick time would be lost. Also, we do not pay out for any sick time at IMRF, so if you do plan on leaving your employer and you're not close to retirement time, you might want to check with your employer to see if there's any options to be paid out for that sick time. Also, it's only from your final IMRF employer with the exception of educational employers. So for example, if you work for one school district and then another school district and then another school district, as long as your IMRF pension is within your termination date is within 60 days when you leave that final employer, then all the sick time from all of the previous school districts will count. Okay, so I briefly mentioned earlier in the presentation that there are 12 other Illinois reciprocal public pension systems, and so I have listed those systems on the screen. Perhaps the most prevalent systems that IMRF members seem to have reciprocity with would be the state teachers retirement system, the state university retirement system, and the state employees retirement system, and so I'll talk to you a little bit more about reciprocity on the next slide. All right, so how does reciprocity work? Well, to retire under the Reciprocal Act, you need to have at least 1 year of service credit in each of the systems in which you want to combine the service credit. So let's say, for example, with IMRF, you need 10 years of service credit to vest for a pension, and with CSRS, you need 5 years. As long as your combined service credit met the highest vesting requirement of the two systems, you could combine the service and be eligible for a pension with both systems at retirement time. Again, you need to have at least 1 year of service credit in each system with the exception of a teacher's aide. So if you're a teacher's aide and you're enrolled in IMRF and then your next position is covered under the state teachers retirement system, then you would still be eligible to retire reciprocally even though you didn't have 12 months of service credit with us. Also, at retirement time, you'll apply for your pension with both systems, or maybe 3, 4 systems, depending on how many you want to combine the service for at the same time. You don't transfer the service, it just gets combined. And what happens is each system calculates their portion of the pension using their formula, and then they pay you their prorated share. And so if you ever want a reciprocal pension estimate, unfortunately those estimates cannot be calculated online in your member access account. You need to call either our 800 number, 1-800-ASK-IMRF, or send a secure message to request a reciprocal pension estimate. And that's always done by whichever system you're currently enrolled in. So all of you are enrolled in IMRF, so we would calculate the reciprocal estimate for you. If any of you left IMRF and then later switched over to TRS, then they would calculate that benefit for you. All right, now let's talk about disability benefits. So generally, you're eligible for monthly payments of about 50% of your monthly earnings if you have at least 12 consecutive months of service credit on file with IMRF, if you're going to be disabled for 30 or more days, if you are unable to perform your IMRF duties as assigned by your employer, and also you're not receiving any compensation. And so how it works is IMRF, we have a 30-day waiting period before you're eligible for benefits. So that 30-day waiting period starts with your first day of medical treatment following your last day of work. And so you could potentially be eligible for disability benefits starting the 31st day, as long as you're no longer receiving compensation from your employer. So on our end, we are required to reduce your disability benefit based on Social Security disability benefits you may receive or workers' compensation benefits you may receive. So workman's compensation is normally 66 2/3. So since at IMRF we pay 50%, we would reduce your disability payments down to $10. And if you're wondering, why is it worth my time to fill out all that paperwork for only $10? Well, the answer is, if you're on an approved IMRF disability leave, then you're earning service credit. And then also your death benefits are protected if you're on approved IMRF disability leave, and then your retirement benefits are protected as well. Okay, so as an IMRF member, you have important death benefits that you should know about, and the amount and type of your IMRF death benefits depend on whether you're active, inactive, or retired. So today we're just going to talk about the active member death benefits. And so if you have less than 1 year of service credit, as you can see on the screen, then your death benefit to your beneficiary would just be a return of your member contributions. Unless it was a job-related death, then it would also include 1 year of salary. If you have more than 1 year of service credit but no qualifying spouse, then your beneficiary can choose between either a lump sum of 1 year salary plus member contributions plus interest, or a beneficiary annuity. Or if you are vested and you have a qualifying spouse, and again, vested for Tier 1, 8 years, Tier 2, 10 years, and a qualifying spouse, let's go back a little bit, that would be someone that you have been married to or in a civil union with for at least 1 year while you actively worked for your IMRF employer. So if you're vested and you have a qualifying spouse, they have 3 different death benefit options they could choose from if you passed while you were actively working. And so that would be either a surviving spouse pension plus $3,000, a beneficiary annuity, or a lump sum refund of your member contributions plus interest plus 1 year salary. If while you are actively working for an IMRF employer, if you do not have your spouse named as your sole primary beneficiary, then they lose the option of a surviving spouse pension. All right, so the final benefit we will discuss today is refunds. So while you are actively working for an IMRF employer, your contributions must remain on deposit. If you leave your IMRF employer, you have a couple different options. So the first option would be to leave your contributions on file, and then your service credit would remain intact. And that's what we strongly encourage you to do, especially if you think there's a chance you might return to another IMRF employer in the future to meet the vesting requirements. Also, If you leave your IMRF employer and you're age eligible and vested for a pension, you do not have the option of taking a refund. You have to take your benefit in the form of a monthly annuity. Another option for taking a refund if you leave your IMRF employer is that you could choose to have the contributions paid to you directly. But if so, the IRS does require us to withhold 20% for federal taxes right off the top because the money was tax deferred. And if you're under the age of 59 and a half, then you'd be liable for 10% tax penalty at tax time for an early withdrawal of retirement funds. Or another option would be that you could take that refund and you could roll it over into another qualified retirement plan, like a 401A, a 403B, or a 457, so that your funds remain tax deferred. So those are pretty much the options. Leave the contributions where they're at or ask for a refund.
Now, quick question. If you stop working for an IMRF employer and you leave the contributions on deposit, okay, so that secures your contribution for your years of service.
Exactly. As long as your contributions remain on file, your service credit remains intact. If you withdraw your contributions, then you forfeit the service credit.
Does your deposit still earn interest, or is it frozen at the...
So we calculate your pension using a formula. So it has to do with your final rate of earnings, your years of service, and a factor. If you never get vested for a pension and later you pull your contributions out, you get your contributions back only.
No interest?
No interest, no employer contributions, correct. All right, now we're going to discuss the factors again that we use to determine your monthly pension amount. So that's your FRE, which is your final rate of earning, your final rate of earnings, your years and months of service with your IMRF employer or employers, and then also your age at retirement time. So we're going to talk about how your FRE is calculated. So for our Tier 1 members, we take the average of your highest consecutive 48 months within your last 10 years of service. And then for our Tier 2 members, we take the average of your highest consecutive 96 months within your last 10 years of service. So basically, we would take the highest 96 months consecutively and then divide them by 96. That's how we get to the FRE. Okay, so your service credit determines how much of your final rate of earnings is replaced. And so we have a 2-tier multiplier. And so for the first 15 years of service, you get 1 2/3%, so 1.667. And then for every year or month after 15 years, you get 2%. So we add that together, and that's the percentage of your final rate of earnings that gets replaced at retirement time. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So let's say I have 15 years or 20 years, let's say, of service credit with an IMRF employer. My first 15 years would be times by, again, 1 2/3%, or 1.667. So that would equal 25.005. Then my next 5 years would be times by our second multiplier. So that would be the 2%. And so that would give me 10%. If you add the two together, if I have 20 years of IMRF service credit, my pension will be about 35% of my final rate of earnings. More specifically, 35.005%. All right, so this graph shows what percentage of your final rate of earnings you will receive based on your years of service credit. And so the slope of the graph goes up slightly higher at a different angle after 15 years of service credit, and that's because of the difference between the 1 2/3% multiplier and the 2% multiplier. So as you can see from the screen, a member that has about 24 years of service credit would receive about 43% of their final rate of earnings. A member with 32 years would have about 59% of their final rate of earnings. And all Tier 1 and Tier 2 members max out at 40 years of service credit or 75% of your final rate of earnings. That's the maximum that you could receive. All right, now let's talk about the optional savings account that you can contribute to while you are actively working for your IMRF employer. And so that's called the Voluntary Additional Contribution Account, and it's an easy way to help you save additional income for retirement. All right, so with this program, you can choose to make additional after-tax contributions to an individual voluntary additional contribution account. So as you can see on the screen, you can contribute anywhere from 1 to 10% of your salary up to the wage cap. And then these contributions are after tax, whereas your regular member contributions, again, are tax deferred, so a little bit different. And in this account, you earn 7.25% interest. So we credit the interest, though, a little bit differently than a traditional savings account. We credit the interest annually at the end of the year based on the previous January 1st opening balance. So as you can see on the screen from the table attached, you will not earn any interest the first year that you start contributing to the account. Also, you can start or stop contributing to this account at any time. And so if you wanted to start contributing, all you would have to do is complete Form 630 and submit that back to IMRF. All right, so the voluntary additional contributions are a little bit different than the regular member contributions, in which you can withdraw these contributions at any time. So as I stated earlier in the program, your regular member contributions always have to remain on deposit while you're actively working for an IMRF employer. The same is not true with the voluntary additional contributions. So if at some point in time you needed to withdraw the funds, whether it be to go on vacation or to buy a house, you could do so. However, you would have to withdraw the entire balance. So if over the years you had contributed $5,000, but you only needed $1,000, unfortunately, you would have to pull all $5,000 out. Also, the interest, that does have to remain on deposit while you're actively working for an IMRF employer. The interest could not be withdrawn until you either leave the IMRF employer or retire. So just your contributions can be pulled out. All right, now I'm going to give you an example of two members that started contributing to the voluntary additional contribution account. They started contributing at age 25. And they earned a base salary of $30,500 a year. And each of them received a 2% raise every year, and they decided to retire at age 67. And so the member on the left contributed 1% of their salary, and the member on the right contributed 5% of their salary. And as you can see, there's quite a huge difference on the amount of money that would be in the account based on the percentage that the member decided to contribute. So member on the right would have had $521,044 in the account at retirement time. Member on the left, $104,209. And we'll come back to this graphic a little bit more and we'll go over the other options. If you leave your voluntary additional contributions on deposit until you retire, you'll have a couple different options as long as you have at least $4,500 in that account at retirement time. So if you have at least $4,500 in there, you can choose to either take a second monthly lifetime annuity, or you can choose to take a lump sum refund of those contributions plus interest. So again, remember, your contributions in this case are after tax. So the only portion that would be subject to federal tax if you chose the lump sum option, if the money was not rolled into a tax deferred account, would be the interest. We're going to go back and look at that previous infographic. So in this situation, the member at retirement time, the member on the left, they could choose either to take a second monthly lifetime annuity in the amount of $765, or they could choose the lump sum option, which, as we discussed earlier, was $104,209. So in that case, the member's contributions were $20,484. That would be the amount that the member would have already paid tax on. The interest, the $83,725, would be the amount that the member has not paid tax on. So that amount, if a member chooses to take the lump sum, that would be subject to 20% for federal tax unless it was rolled into a tax deferred account. Okay?
Is that interest rate that's paid on these a constant?
It's 7.25%. So it could change in the future, but that's what it is right now, and it's been that for several years.
And what do they base that rate on?
Actuarial tables and just investment returns, the percentage that we think we're going to get back in that investment. So at any time, if we ever change that rate, it would always be posted on our website, and we would let you know if the interest rate was going to go down or up.
The rate did change, what, 5, 6 years ago?
Right, it was 7.5 before, and it went down to 7.25. We have not been told one way or the other if it's going to go back up or if it's going to remain constant at this like it has been. But again, if once we know, you would know, they would send probably a fundamentals newsletter out, and then they'll always post that information on our website as well. All right, so basically today we just covered, I gave you a general overview of IMRF so that you have a better understanding of our organization. We talked about your benefits, which are your retirement benefits, disability benefits, death benefits, and then also refunds. We talked about how your pension is calculated, and then we also discussed the voluntary additional contribution program. And so we will have a chance to, I'll give you a chance to ask some questions. If you still needed further clarification or had more questions afterwards, we do have our contact center, which again is 1-800-ASK-IMRF. They answer phone calls Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 5:30. And then for the members that have the online member access account, again, you can always send a secure message through the online account. And typically we can respond to those within about 24 to 48 hours. Okay? Questions? And I can't answer any questions on any member-specific account, just general questions. Yes?
Can you still collect Social Security in addition to this?
Okay, so the question that was asked was, can you still collect Social Security in addition to IMRF? And the answer is yes. So while you're actively working for your IMRF employer, you are paying into Social Security. So some of the other reciprocal pension funds, you do not pay into Social Security, but with IMRF, you do. If you retire under the Reciprocal Act, you would have to check with your reciprocal system to see if there would be an offset in your Social Security due to potentially, if you work for TRS, they do not pay into Social Security. But for members that retire just with IMRF, yes, you have been paying into Social Security. So sometimes there is some confusion on Social Security's end. And so you can always call IMRF and we can produce a letter that you can give to Social Security, just pointing out to them the Section 218 agreement that we have with them and that you have been paying in while you've been working for your IMRF employer.
If you left, on the VAC, if you left employment before you were fully vested, and you take the funds out, all the VAC, only your contribution is
If you leave your IMRF employer, then you want to pull your VAC contributions out, then you get your contributions plus the interest at that time.
but only if you have reached retirement age or...
You can pull out your voluntary additional contributions at any time. So while you're actively working, you can only pull out your contributions. When you leave your IMRF employer, whether it's just because you want to leave your employer or you want to retire, you can pull all your contributions out plus the interest.
Okay, there's no reduction or anything, none of the reduction in interest or anything like that?
Nope. Or the other option is to leave it on deposit until you retire, and then you would have the option, as long as there's more than $4,500 in there, to take the annuity or the lump sum.
About what percent of your active members utilize the VAC program?
I honestly don't have that statistic. I'm not sure. I'm sure there is a department that probably runs, different statistics and analyzes figures like that, but unfortunately I don't know what that number would be.
Do you happen to know how close, if I use the online estimator, how accurate that'll be?
Sure. The online member access account, the pension estimator, is fairly accurate. There's some differences between the estimates we run for you and the online pension calculator, and that is with the online tool, you can only put in a full percentage salary increase, so 2%, 3%, 4%. But if your increase is actually 2.5%, if you call IMRF and we run the calculations, we can make it the 2.5% versus 2%. Another limitation to the online pension calculator, it always defaults your salary increase to January, whereas if we run the estimate for you and your increase is actually, let's say, in March, we can go in and manipulate the system and change it to your increase being in March. But it is pretty accurate, yes, other than those small limitations. I think you had a question?
I have two questions.
Sure.
One is that, you hear about the 13th paycheck, and how that's calculated, if that's your normal retirement monthly pay, and then...
The 13th payment, it's a percentage amount, so it's not a full additional pension payment. So in 2022, it was 23.602% of a member's June gross benefit amount. So we calculate the percentage every June, and then we post that information on our website. And so when you're eligible for the 13th payment depends on when you retire. So let's just use 2023 as an example, since that's the year we're in. So if you terminate employment anywhere between January 1st and June 30th, and you start collecting your benefit right away, then you'd be eligible for the 13th payment July of 2024. If in this calendar you terminated employment anywhere between July 1st and December 31st and started collecting your benefit right away, then you wouldn't be eligible for the 13th payment until July of 2025. So it depends what time of year you retire. You have to receive 12 monthly pension payments before you're eligible.
And if you retire with your pension, IMRF pension, can you go back to work? Or IMRF?
You can, but there are new rules with regards to separation of service that took effect January 1st of 2021. So to be eligible to start your IMRF pension when you retire, you cannot be working in any capacity for any IMRF employer. So that includes temporary or part-time work, regardless of the number of hours worked, as well as working as an independent contractor or leased employee. And then before retirement and within 60 days after, no prearrangement, even an informal one, can be made between you and any IMRF employer that you'll return to work. And then you're not eligible to work for any IMRF employer for at least 60 days from your pension effective date. So for example, if I stopped working anytime in March, my pension effective date would be April 1st. That's when my clock would start that I couldn't work for an IMRF employer for 60 days. Starting the 61st day, then I could talk to an IMRF employer about returning to work, but then there's only a certain number of hours you're allowed to work in a 12-month time frame and still draw your pension. So if it was with a school district, the maximum number of hours that you could work is 599. So what you would need to do is contact IMRF, let us know that you're returning to work. We would open something called a return to work case for you, and then we would let you know your 365-day period that you would need to track your hours. If you reached 599 hours in that 12-month time frame, you would either have to stop working until your time frame started over, or you'd have to suspend your pension and re-enroll in IMRF and contribute 4.5% of your salary again. I know, it's a lot to take in. We have it all posted on our website though, so you can see it all in writing there.
I got a question. Why would you retire and go back to work?
Great, I know, right. Hopefully you'd want to move somewhere warmer with palm trees.
Is there any talk of the sit-downs for retirement with one-on-one instead of doing webinars?
We have resumed those. So we are seeing members in our Oak Brook location. And then I was talking to Corey earlier that if there's enough interest, someone can come out to the employer and meet with members back to back for 20-minute counseling sessions. And then we're also offering 25-minute phone consultations. We call them personal benefit reviews. And you can schedule those right through the online member access account. When you're on your home screen, your My IMRF page, there's a green box. You would basically click Learn More, and it will show you all the different available dates and times. You can pick a time that works best for you, enter your phone number, and then we would call you that date and time. So a couple different options. But yes, we did resume the in-person appointments in Oak Brook. Any other questions? Yes?
How far in advance do you have to put in when you want to retire?
So on our end, we need 30 days notice before you want to retire. So that's when you should officially apply for your pension. And it can be done one of several ways. So the first way is that you can contact IMRF and you can ask us to mail you the paper forms. So that would be the application to officially apply for your pension, along with a direct deposit authorization form and a W-4P tax withholding form. We also need legal documents from you at retirement time. First being a copy of your birth certificate. If you're not certain where that's at, we'll take a copy of your passport. And then if you're married, we need a copy of your marriage license or divorced first and last page of divorce decree. Other option is if you have an online member access account, you can apply for your pension electronically right online. If you do retire reciprocally, it does take a little bit longer to calculate the pension. So because the systems have to communicate information back and forth with regards to your wages, service credit, and contribution, and those instances, sometimes it can take up to 90 days. But again, that's just for a reciprocal retirement. Any other questions? Yes?
So online, I can calculate my pension,
Absolutely.
but I can't add in my sick days that are going to be.
You can. There's an option. There's a drop-down feature where it asks about unused, unpaid sick days. And so if you have a general idea about how many days might be reported at retirement time, you can add that information in there. And even salary increases.
And then I have
Okay.
That's when I worked in Mokina. So that would get, those sick days would get added to my sick days here, and the total of them would,
For Mokina, was it a school district?
yes.
Okay, so as long as you terminate employment with another school district and have a pension within 60 days, then the sick time from all the previous school districts will count.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a silly question.
No silly questions.
So, if I was going with the school year, my last day would be in May, but we technically get paid till August, so am I retiring in May or am I retiring in August?
You'd have to check with the authorized agent at your employer to see when they consider you in terminated status. What they're going to put on the electronic termination of IMRF participation form, and it may have to do with how your contract is set up, if you get paid all 12 months. So they would be the ones to best advise you when they consider you no longer actively employed with the district. So if it was May, then your pension would be effective in June. If it was August, your pension would be effective in September.
No other questions?
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rebecca.
Oh,
for
sure.
coming today and for presenting. We appreciate
No
the information.
problem.
If there's anything as a follow-up after today, you can always email me questions, C. Sieber, and I would be happy to get those, gather them, reach out to Rebecca, and we can do another like Q&A if there's anything additional. Thank you all for coming.